Hello, everyone. Let's see, people is connecting. Let me say hello to some of the friends I see here. Hello, Vincent. Hello, Benoit, Alberto Baldi, Crystal Miller. Hello, Damien McConville. Hello, everyone. Very nice to see you connecting. Hello, John Hobbs from Ireland. I see also new people joining. Hello, welcome, everyone. Delphine Vase, Ravesa Govender. Excellent. Very nice to see you all. Good afternoon from the TCI network and welcome to this global webinar that we call Sustainable Clusters for All, the title for our global conference, and where we will present today the highlights of this upcoming TCI Global Conference that will be held 9 to 11 of November in Durban in South Africa. Durban and the eThekwini municipality, the economic hub of the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and both high concentration of industry clusters. So today we and our conference partners are going to introduce these Durban clusters and how they are collaborating to make the region more sustainable and more inclusive. This is a snapshot of what the conference delegates will experience in their visit to Durban. And also we want to introduce you some of the connections that you can make during the conference. Yeah. We will also feature some of the highlights of the program, including interaction and networking opportunities that for us is always very important in TCI, and some fantastic social moments that our conference organizers are preparing for this special conference, where we will also celebrate the 25th anniversary of the global conference. Wow, 25 years, bringing together all the cluster community and helping to strengthen the capacities for clusters and for the people who work in clusters. Let me introduce our speakers today. Our conference director, Septi Bukula. Septi is founder of CISA Network and also a member of the TCI Board of Directors. Septi, you have many hats here. But today he's going to be the person who introduces about the TCI conference. Then we will have also Russell Curtis from Invest Durban, CEO of Invest Durban, and also the chair of the steering committee of this conference, and Rob Stewart from DMA, CEO at DMA, and yeah, also an important part of the conference steering committee, helping along with the organization of many of the cluster visits that we're going to have. And first of all, our president, Merete Nielsen. Let me introduce her, and yeah, the floor is yours, Merete, for welcoming us to this global webinar with your preliminary words. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So from my side, as president of the global network, let me welcome you to this TCI Global Webinar. We're looking so much forward to coming to Durban in around a month. So time is running, time is clicking. It's great to see the enthusiasm and support for going ahead on the conference. It's been quite a turmoil period. I think we are in this multiple crisis situation with COVID, now war in Ukraine, war in Europe, shifting paradigms around energy, and also the whole geopolitical situation. So a lot of downsides and areas of concern, but us working with clusters, we know that we have a great tool. It's not like a magic thing that can solve everything, but it is really a way of connecting, of collaborating about the problems we have and the challenges of tomorrow. So it's good that we can come finally to Durban. and celebrate the concept of clusters, celebrate 25th anniversary for TCI Network, but also looking into actually a place where clusters have been running for 25 years. So that's even better that this, you know, the story of TCI Network and the local story in Durban is really aligned, and we can benefit and look into what you've done. So let me also personally thank Septi for pushing this along for such a long period. You are a very patient man and have many talents, and it's been great that with the enthusiasm and energy you brought into this. Also a huge thank to Russell and Rob for pulling this along, as well with the steering committee behind. This is what will make a great conference, that many people come together with different perspectives, and we're looking so much forward to coming and celebrating and investigating more on the ground of what you've been doing. As Patricia mentioned, we had this topic about inclusiveness, sustainability. I hope also today to hear from some of the participants joining. You know, we have a lot of proposals already coming in. So, but if you have something additional we should build into the programs, let us hear from you. Also, let us hear from you if you expect more from the community, from TCI. What are some of the topics high on your agenda? What can be built into the program to make it even more interesting for you? And as I was visiting in March, it was great to be with you. And I know some of the people speaking later on are very modest. I can only personally say it's a very, very nice location. Septi says it's the real South Africa. Don't want to make any kind of competition, but still, but it's a very nice, very beautiful area. So only can recommend to come early or a bit stay later to explore more, investigate more, and visit more. So I'm so much looking forward to hearing latest updates and highlights and having a lively discussion on how we're going to make this a great conference. So welcome.
Thank you, Merete. Thank you very much. Let's start sharing our presentation. Natalia, please. And I'm going to show you what is the plan for today, and also how you can interact in this webinar. Next one, please. Yeah. So the idea is that at the end of all of us saying something about the conference, and hopefully you find it interesting, we are going to open the interaction with the audience. Please bring to us any question you may have about the conference, about the content, about the sessions, the people, and also let us know how we can help to build connections during your stay in Durban. I know many cluster organizations may have already some direct interests, you know, to bring potential, to find potential partners there, but also agencies and other kind of organizations may have also an interest, and we can help you to build your own agenda of contacts during your stay. Let's move then to the next part, and I give now the word to Septi Bukula, our conference director. Septi, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia, and you, Merete, for that introduction. And greetings to everyone on the call. And it's really a real privilege to have everyone here. And Merete, to your comment earlier, sometimes I don't know whether I'm patient or stupid. You know, sometimes I feel I'm more stupid than patient, you know, in some of the battles that we have to fight. But hey, it's we're really looking forward to welcoming the TCI Global family to the beautiful coastal city of Durban. And I would like to just start off by recognizing my two colleagues and partners here. Russell Curtis, the CEO of Invest Durban, has been incredibly helpful as also the chair of the steering committee, as Patricia has said, you know, incredibly helpful in helping us move the dial forward as we've been organizing. And Rob Stewart, who is both gentlemen are, you know, are steeped into the cluster community in KwaZulu-Natal, you know, on a daily basis, and both of them have really added enormous value. And I just would like to particularly publicly acknowledge them. Of course, we've partnered for the conference with key entities in the KwaZulu-Natal economy. The first one being the Provincial Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs of the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That will be a provincial entity that is responsible, among others, for the cluster agenda in partnership with the municipality where Russell's entity, Invest Durban, is based. So that's one partner. The municipality is another partner. And then we partnered with one of the clusters within the milieu of clusters in KwaZulu-Natal, Durban Automotive Cluster, and of course, 2 convention bureaus, a provincial and a national one. And I'd like to just acknowledge them as well. So Patricia has shared the theme, which is very exciting. And I think within the particular context of South Africa, the inclusion element of it is really particularly key. And so we look forward to the things that we'll be able to learn on all the different aspects of the theme. But for us, especially as an SME-based network in tourism, that is going to be of particular interest. You're going to be hosted at the beautiful Durban International Convention Center, the first convention center in the country, really a world-class facility. Many awards won. I've lost count, but a really fantastic facility, and we're looking forward to hosting you there. And we have many very world-class hotels in the vicinity. I'll leave it to Patricia to talk about perhaps some of the social events that we are planning. But as you may be aware, day 1, which is the 9th of November, we're going to be going on what we call technical visits or cluster visits. Durban is unofficially the cluster capital of South Africa, just by the sheer number of clusters that are based there. Except I have to say, Russell and Rob, having been part of a workshop yesterday by the Department of Small Business Development, I left with a question mark about that title. I think the Western Cape would want to compete with you for that title. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. There's a number of clusters in KwaZulu-Natal, many of which we're hoping will be able to visit on the 9th of November. And we're working with Rob. Thank you for that, Rob, assisting us in setting up those cluster meetings. And then the conference, of course, will then kick off on the 1st and conclude on the 2nd of November. I need to mention also that part of the reason why we decided to invite the conference to come to South Africa was obviously, for learning, being part of the TCI family, but also because, we've been working with the provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal, we being the network, to try and catalyze a new cluster in the province, and that being a tourism cluster, because tourism has been hard hit by COVID-19. It's in the process of recovery and rebuilding, and we would want to see if there was a possibility to rebuild differently. And we've been looking at the cluster methodology as one potentially potent methodology that we could follow. So for us, a practical outcome, besides all the learning that we are certain we're going to get, and there's a lot of excitement about that, a practical outcome for us would be that, hosting the 25th Global Conference in Durban, South Africa would help us on that journey to catalyze that. So as part of that, we will have half day, perhaps a 1-day workshop prior to the conference, which will focus on tourism clusters. We're inviting 2 tourism clusters, one from Spain, another one from France, who will be part of that conversation with tourism stakeholders from around the country prior to the conference, and we really look forward to that. The last thing, Patricia, I'd like to mention, and if I've left out anything, because I don't want to take up too much time, you can point out. Here in South Africa, the cluster agenda, which was started by the Department of Trade and Industry, now called the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, within national government, has shifted to the small business development. So that department has been running a series of workshops around the country talking about clusters more broadly, clusters and SME development, but also specifically to promote the TCI conference. So they've been running around the country. Yesterday's workshop was in my home province here in Gauteng in Joburg, and I had the privilege to be invited to speak about the conference and the program that's helping the Department of Small Business Development organize those workshops is an EU-funded program called EDSA, ecosystem development for small enterprise, in the country. So that is also pushing the conference. I was there yesterday when they announced it, and they really promote it. And because of that connection with the Department of Small Business Development, one of our government speakers that we expect to join us at the conference will be the Minister of Small Business Development. As of yesterday, I received confirmation that that minister will be among us. And then, of course, the responsible head of economic development from a government perspective in KwaZulu-Natal. So I'm going to leave it there, Patricia. I'm happy to take any questions if there are.
Thank you, Septi, for this brief introduction to what we can find in this conference. Let me go a little bit deeper into the program. It is always a challenge to design a program for the global conference of the TCI network. That for us is, of course, our flagship event, but we also want to that it means something for the cluster practitioners, that they can bring something back home that is really inspiring them with new ideas, with new developments, with the latest trends, and so on. Also with more connections, of course, to the world from the region that we are visiting every year, our hosts, of course, but also from other parts of the world. And then to also go and try to put our grain of sand to the professional development of cluster practitioners. Through our conferences, more than 5,000 cluster practitioners have been inspired, and I think we have helped to develop their skills on clustering, which is not easy, as we know, to get from a usual training or a seminar or something like that. Well, with this in mind, and with this challenging also title that we decided to go, Sustainable Clusters for All, and I thank you also our board of directors for giving us more direction on where we should focus the theme for the conference. We started. First, we want to bring what clusters are doing nowadays. What we see in our network is top on their agendas. What means this sustainable cluster for all? What means sustainability for clusters? How they are helping to reduce the carbon footprint? How they are helping to work with circular economy? How they are working? The very different roles that clusters can play in having a more sustainable and green economic model. We want to also focus on clusters, on collaboration, on how collaboration is changing. What means collaboration nowadays? We see it's more and more complex every day. The cluster organizations themselves, they have to tackle and coordinate a very complex agenda of collaboration with many different stakeholders. How are cluster organizations, cluster agencies, governments pushing all this and tackling all this? And the last part of this for all, inclusiveness, which is a very broad word, but for us is very meaningful, and especially in those days where we are, and especially in the place where we are. We are going to talk about SMEs, inclusiveness in the economy, and how clusters can help to integrate more SMEs into the economic landscape. We are going to talk about female inclusion in clusters, how some clusters are working across Africa. We see examples of more female participation in this. We also see examples of inclusiveness as understood of remote regions, that are not so well connected as the hubs that we can have in mind for economic transactions or global value chains or so on. Well, all these topics are going to feed this session for sustainable clusters for all. And then on the right, on November 11, you see this cluster generating impact. For us, it's also very important to prove the impact that clusters have. This is something that in TCI we have been discussing this year in the many workshops and opportunities that we have to meet, how we prove the impact of clusters. We have just published a new guide for evaluation that we will present, of course, during the conference in Durban, that helps to build a framework on evaluation. I think that can be useful for many of the people that is participating in the conference. We want to also make some more participatory sessions. These flying challenges is a nice surprise that we have, but we want to hear also what are the challenges from the floor, from the people participating, and then try to find kind of a solution room to those challenges, and together start building what can be a useful and actionable agenda for clusters. We also want to bring many funding stories and what we call the confession booth. So what didn't work so well, and we can also learn from. That's a part of another session that we want to do during the conference. Then also for us, when we design the conference, it's important to have a trend vision, you know, or be trendsetters a little bit. And here, Merete is working hard on what we call the global trends of clusters. So trying to compile a bit what we see from all our exposure to different ways of understanding clustering, that is very diverse in different parts of the world, but try to extract from there some global trends that can be useful also for all the participants. We also have a very important part of our task in TCI, I would say, or how we deliver value to our members through the policy learning. And we want to also showcase what a modern policy should look like to support clusters best way. And this is what we are going also to do in this conference, trying to bring you some of these highlights. And there is another important part that we want to achieve with this conference, that is to build up a TCI Africa chapter. We want to bring more of the African voices on what cluster support is needed across Africa, how clusters can perform best way, and also what kind of policies they need to support this in the long term. This is kind of the conversation that is behind all this vision for future and trade sessions. And then in the afternoon sessions, it's more of the voices of the members of the TCI network in different ways. You know, we have made an open call for proposals. We received very interesting things. I'm going to mention now a few. We asked them to focus on 3 main themes: collaboration for transformation, sustainability, inclusiveness. And here we brought things like, let me read, clusters connecting the regional economy and the societal challenges, cluster driving SMEs economic inclusion, supporting the cluster ecosystem through digitalization, providing a strong value proposition for cluster members, raising resilient clusters over the cluster life cycle, and something more concrete on how to boost Europe-Africa collaboration through clusters. Well, all this is very promising. I think it's a fantastic way to understand how clusters are delivering value to their members all over the world. Then on November 11, in this afternoon session, is what we call the ecosystems. We want to focus more on concrete ecosystems like agri-food, tourism, and more manufacturing or all kind of industrial clusters, and try to bring examples of these concrete ecosystems. And below, we have also some sessions that are more like useful things that the clusters can take back home, you know. Capacity building, we want to have some sessions where they really can well, have something useful for the clusters, like, for example, how to build cross-cluster collaboration, or how to build a good governance for the cluster, or how should be the best service provision for clusters, you know, all the business model of the clusters, or so on. So this is something that we are going to organize here. And what we call the cluster toolkit, very useful things, you know, that can be well, an inspiration for clusters to use in different ways. For example, clusters in the metaverse, how clusters are used in the metaverse to showcase their products and their actions and their activities. Someone also proposed to show an action guide on how SMEs are going sustainable, how the cluster can help with that. Also, one paper to look at the impact of clusters on entrepreneurship. Well, many interesting things that well, will fit this part of the clusters toolkit session. And that's all. I don't want to take more time. Also, I think it's quite full of things. We are going to release the next version of the program very soon. I know many of you want to see your names already and where we think you can best contribute. We hope in the coming 2 weeks it's ready. Next slide, please. The other important thing in a conference like this is to make connections and to make global connections. So I'm sure you want to know who is coming. This is the data to the 30th of September. And I try to put here the different kind of stakeholders and cluster, and cluster supporting organizations that are going to come to the conference. Of course, from the Durban side, all the organizers, the steering committee, a high-level representation of the South African government, as Septi was saying. Well, I leave the floor to our next two speakers to let us know more of all the local ecosystem. Many cluster organizations, and this is great. I think every conference, every global conference after the other, we see more presence of cluster organizations themselves. To us, this is a very important thing. It means that clusters are taking ownership of their own dialogue. I remember in the past, it used to be only policymakers talking about what clusters should do, and this is clusters also driving the cluster agenda. Durban Automotive Cluster, Durban Chemicals Cluster, KwaZulu-Natal Clothing and Textile Cluster, the Queenie Furniture Cluster, all the clusters from other places in South Africa, the Craft and Design Institute in Cape Town. From Ghana's agri-food clusters also will have representation, Catalan Water Partnership, the Kids clusters from Catalonia, IDEAM cluster, it's Advanced Manufacturing cluster in Ireland, ABIC, the Furniture cluster in the Basque Country, Iceland Tourism Cluster, Basque Tourism, CISA Tourism Growth Network. Well, all these clusters will be present, and many more represented through the agencies that are here from Flanders, Upper Austria, Basque Country, Australia, Catalonia, Germany, Netherlands, Alaska in the US, Ghana, we have Chihuahua also. Well, there are many representatives here. This is like a strong part also of the TCI network. On the administration, Hungarian Ministry of Finance, the Department of Innovation and Economic Development from the state of Chihuahua in Mexico, multilateral organizations, we have so far confirmed UNIDO, Germans, GIZ, the European Commission, DG Grow also, we have been in conversations, still need to be confirmed, but we hope they can join us. And I see Benoit also connected here in the webinar. Consulting firms like BMA, Bego Consulting, Vivisio, universities from Germany, from Mexico, Ireland. Well, Northern Ireland, Sweden here. And on the right, all the countries represented so far, 20 countries. We have at the moment 70 registrations and growing. So hope many of you participating today also decide to join us. And this is all from my side. Please, if you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we close here this presentation. And I hand over to Russell Curtis from Invest Durban, and longtime member of TCI as well. Finally, you managed to bring us all to, to Durban.
Sorry, Patricia, as Russell prepares to come in, I think the slide that you shared on who is attending would be very nice if it could be done into a social media thing that we can post as part of our promotion. You can just take out the first part where it talks about the steering committee and all of that. But I think the rest would be very useful information from a marketing point of view.
Of course.
So I would request that.
That's why I took the time today to put the list into a more readable format, because I know this is important for everyone. We all want to know who is going to be there. And just to mention, we are talking to many more people. There is interest from other places, especially across Africa. We want to make a special call to all African practitioners. Well, we know it's always difficult to take 1 week to go to a place, but I think it's really meaningful, and I hope many of you can join us in Durban. Yeah, Russell. Now, yes, the floor is yours.
Awesome, great, thanks very much. Greetings to yourself, Patricia, and Merete, President. Lovely to see you guys again, and lovely to also have had you visit our city and see firsthand that we are often a tale of two cities. So greetings to everyone from South Africa, greetings to everyone from my province of KwaZulu-Natal, and greetings to everyone from my city of Durban. So for those who are considering coming to the event, South Africa, we are a nation of 60 million people. And in terms of GDP size, South Africa, it's debatable whether we are second or third largest from a GDP perspective on the African continent. We vie with Nigeria and Egypt on that GDP crown. Our country has got about a $450 billion GDP coming out of our region. Coming closer to home, my province of KwaZulu-Natal, we are a very diverse population of about 11.5 million people in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That province of KZN is roughly the same size as Portugal, to give some degree of comparator in terms of size. And province of KZN is one of 9 different provinces that make up the country of South Africa. South Africa, we all know Johannesburg, we all know Cape Town, perhaps a little bit lesser known as Durban, but we are the 3 main metropolitan regions in South Africa. And in terms of our metropolitan city of Durban, we are by many measures the second largest metropolitan region in South Africa, whether you go by our population, which is nearly 4 million people, which again, by rough equation, it's about the same size as Berlin in population size, spread across 2,500 square kilometers of our metropolitan city of Durban and 100 kilometers of Golden Beach coastline. We sit on the east coast, southeast coast of South Africa, and we call it our Golden Mile because the Indian Ocean is warm all year round. We have quite a diverse city, as I said, in terms of our history, quite a diverse city in terms of our different culture groups and population groups. But zooming quite closely into the industrial nature of this particular conference, I can quite confidently tell TCI members that we have the most concentrated set of industrial clusters formally structured in special purpose vehicles dominated by business of any metropolitan region on the entire African continent. We started thinking about clusters and started looking at trying to form clusters about 25 years ago. And the first one to come out the ground was our automotive cluster. Nowadays, we have not only the automotive and allied cluster, but we have a chemicals cluster, a textiles and clothing cluster, a contact center or call center cluster, a leather and footwear cluster, a furniture and woodworking cluster, a maritime cluster, and others. And so these are all operated as formal public-private partnerships, where the board is dominated by industry leadership on purpose. As the public sector, we also sit on the board to introduce some of the national developmental imperatives and some of the national public sector resources into these different clusters. The clusters all have their own business plan, very clearly defined by that business lead and complemented by public sector opportunities and resources into those fairly clearly defined business plans of the clusters. The clusters then are largely operated according to a committee system. So if you can picture a business plan having 4 or 5 pillars to it, a volunteer set of committee members forming each of those pillars of the business plan, and then implementing that business plan through these committee-based structures. They are all administered by a couple of different firms, and that administration helps to keep the engine room of the business plan delivery running and to help track and measure the various metrics in terms of the KPIs of performance and managing the finances of those clusters. The funding of the clusters originally all did start out with the public sector putting money in to start the clusters, but over time, the oldest one, for example, the automotive cluster, now sits at somewhere near a 50-50 funding from industry, having seen the value, and public sector supporting, through to some of the newer clusters where that ratio is perhaps a little bit lower and public sector support a little bit higher. I'm sure Rob will talk to some of these issues. But the clusters have been a huge benefit for our industry across a number of different areas, whether that's skills development, whether that's import replacement, whether that's export promotion, whether that's improving the logistics and supply chains and efficiencies, and has helped to bring often competitors to work together on issues of shared collaboration and shared cooperation. So we're very pleased to have the TCI Global Conference coming to Durban. We're extremely blessed. We're fully cognizant that it could have gone anywhere in the world. And so we're going to be doing our best to welcome all of the visitors to Durban. We understand it is a long haul, but as Merete, your president, said, we trust you will take a day or two before and a day or two after to experience whether it's the big 5 game reserves, whether it's shark diving that's of interest to you, or whether it's exploring some of our mountain regions that have a long and rich history in terms of culture and outdoor tourism. Enormous cultural opportunities you'll experience here, not the least of which, for example, whether it's the home of the Zulu Kingdom, whether it's being the home of the largest population of people of Indian descent in any one city outside of India, through to some of the largest populations of those of European descent still resident in our province. So you'll find a friend, a cousin, a meal, a song which resonates with you, no matter which part of the world you're coming to visit. With that, Patricia, I'll stop if that's okay with you.
So nice. Now we all want to go there after this nice introduction. But let's talk a little bit more about clusters. Thank you, Russell. And let's go with Rob Stewart. Rob is from BMA, a consultant company that is helping along with many of the cluster organizations. So you act as facilitators and managers of many of the clusters there. Yeah, the floor is yours, Rob.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm going to once again try and share my screen and hopefully it will come up correctly. I know we were having some technical issues earlier. If you could just confirm that that is up for me.
I confirm to you. We see it
Excellent.
perfectly.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And thanks, Russell, for that introduction as well. I was wondering how in a short period of time one sums up both the attractions of coming to South Africa and Durban and the province of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as giving a little taster of some of our experiences. But fortunately, I think Russell's done the job really well of selling the area. So I'll just talk a little bit to some of our clusters and what we're up to very briefly, just to give a sense of what my involvement and my company's involvement has been in clustering over the last 25 years. You can see the 4 logos up there of the clusters that we are involved with. I work for a company called BMA, which we're an expert cluster facilitation organization. And these are 4 clusters that we've been privileged to facilitate since their inception with the DAC, I think over 17 years ago, through to the eThekwini Furniture Cluster, which is the newest of these clusters established, which was set up over 2019. So that's been a fun ride over the last couple of years. So the clusters that we're involved with are manufacturing clusters specifically. So we're quite specific in what we do, and we're really all about building competitive capabilities, establishing and re-establishing our industrial base in the region and of course in the country, and by creating a productive sector and rebuilding the productive sector of our economy, trying to give dignity and opportunities to the citizens of the country. I must say, I think when it comes to our experience, I suspect I'm going to spend most of the time in the confession booth, because we feel like we've been at it for a long time, but certainly in the last couple of years, we've really had to relearn some of the old lessons and learn a whole lot of new lessons as well. But we're a country of the most incredible potential. And yet we've the last couple of years, we really have had quite a rough time of it. When Patricia, or Merete rather, you were talking earlier about COVID and the Ukraine situation, just to add to the challenges, we entered as a country, we entered the 2020 COVID situation with a country that's been struggling economically and politically, and in a state of deindustrialization. And that's really been, from our own company and clustering perspective, the big challenge that we've been trying to address. Unfortunately, on top of COVID, I think as a result of frustrations in 2021, there was large-scale civil unrest. This last year in KwaZulu-Natal specifically, we had some incredible flooding. I know my photographs and pictures are probably quite small, but where it says April 2022, worst flooding in 200 years, that's a picture of the Toyota production plant in Durban. And those are vehicles that are now underwater and have had to be scrapped. The entire factory, which employs over 6,000 people, had to be re-equipped from the ground up after cleaning out over a meter of silt and mud from highly technical equipment from vehicles, many of which had to just be scrapped. So it's been a challenging time. And then unfortunately, in the last couple of months, we're experiencing quite significant electricity supply challenges and blackouts. So we started pivoting significantly in 2020, and I don't think we've stopped yet. We are experiencing a time of significant resource constraints. And I'm obviously very pleased to hear the participation in the upcoming conference, the focus on the policy side of things. I see the participation of the Ecosystem Development for Small Enterprise South Africa. I think Nigel's actually on the call today, where there's a significant push to take the national cluster policy, which has been established, and turn it into consistent implementation. So that Durban Metro, which has been a pioneer in the space, can be joined by provincial counterparts and national government, given that we've had a challenging run of things. And what we've learned from that, of course, is that cluster ecosystems are more important than ever. So I want to talk very briefly to two significant pivots that we've had to make, and a little bit about what the clusters are up to, which when it comes to the conference participation and engagements, there'll be a lot more detail shared. And of course, we really look forward to learning from everybody as to how we can just do much more with what we have. The first big pivot was traditionally the clusters operated largely as silos. They, as Russell outlined, they have their own executives, their own business plans, their own funding structures and models, and in many instances, their own direction. And through COVID and more recently, we've discovered that the engagement and more meaningful cluster to cluster collaboration and alignment is where the real difference can be made. And we know that as no business can be an island of efficiency and a sea of inefficiency, so the same is true of clusters. And so fortunately, we've spent an enormous amount of time in bringing clusters closer together, sharing the lessons, sharing the methodologies, sharing tools, and really aligning the activities around what I've put together here in this sort of pyramid of a combination of activities starting with sort of policy and regulatory advisory. So the intent there is to look, for example, at things like tariff regimes, export incentives, the fact that currently we know in the country we have a significant automotive industry, but it is developed largely around the internal combustion engine, and with greening of automotive industry, we don't have a electric vehicle policy. There have been significant impediments to renewable energy. And so there's been enormous focus across the clusters in collaboration around trying to shape and reshape the policy and regulatory space so that it becomes conducive to investment, conducive to trade, and conducive to growth. One small example is that up until recently, our tariff regime incentivized the exporting of fruit, and we have some magnificent fruit growing regions in the country, but we were incentivized to export and then incentivized to re-import confectionaries made from the same fruit, which makes very little sense when you talk to value adding and economic growth and employment growth. So those are some of the challenges that the clusters are collaborating on. Built on top of that layer of ensuring that there's an adequate policy and regulatory space is simply finding growth. So looking for opportunities such as biomass as raw material inputs, carbon wheeling, which is and electricity wheeling. We have a particular policy in the country around Black economic empowerment, which is a means of addressing many of the injustices of our past, and finding growth and opportunity in that space and inspiration in times of challenge is a big focus. Once one has found opportunities, of course, it's all about strategy and developing business cases and building return on investment, modeling, putting in place implementation frameworks such as monitoring and evaluation, project management, ensuring that there's accountability across the partnership as desired to drive the right behaviors. And then, of course, aligning the value chain and finding the right suppliers, the right customers, the partners, the funders, and bringing that ecosystem together, building competencies, particularly as we talk about the sort of the new challenges of renewables, decarbonization. We need to be focusing extensively on skills development, on productivity, on new technologies and technology sharing. And then, of course, scaling up. So bringing all of that to fruition to ensure that the opportunity that is now made possible is actually realized. And we carry that all the way through to first delivery, where we believe at that stage the competencies and the abilities and the opportunity is realized, and then one can really hand it over to the stakeholders to continue and thrive thereafter. And of course, then alongside all of this is the the shared learning. So, you know, how does one then put the learning cycle, and you talk about Kolb's learning cycle, how do you put that on Hyperloop so that whatever is learned in each of these stages is shared and built on as rapidly as possible across, you know, within the clusters, across the clusters, and throughout the stakeholder groups. And we do that extensively through webinars, through in-factory and increasingly hybrid sessions where we actually stream in expertise or lessons learned into in-person events and facilitate those discussions, facilitate the learning, so that we can go back to the point again of you know, restarting and building up these abilities and building up the success cases. And some of those success stories we will share with you and seek input really as colleagues and fellow experts. I've just, you know, in terms of the collaboration and sharing, just a couple of examples of, you know, from our sort of a toolkit around building up business case models, looking at those ROI cases and ensuring that what we think is an opportunity is actually realizable and bankable, and will have the impact desired. Doing all sorts of diagnostics and engaging, benchmarking and engaging with customers and suppliers to ensure that we understand what the barriers to realizing the potential actually are, and then being able to work on those. We've in the past 2 years built up using digital platforms. We've taken all of our what was once upon a time face-to-face learning and skills development. We've taken it onto digital platforms, which enables us to extend the reach at a much lower cost. So this has been working incredibly well, and we've managed to go from about 120 learners per annum. This year we reached a first round target of 750 learners using this digital platform that the clusters again collaborated and shared resources to establish. So we're very proud of that particular development. And of course, then when we talk about building inclusive societies and inclusive economies, one of the, again, activities shared is the Business Accelerator. And this is where, based on opportunities identified, we go out, we look for potential suppliers, particularly in the small and medium-sized enterprise space, particularly in the Black-owned enterprise space. We give them the opportunity to pitch to customers, pitch their offerings, their products, their services. We've partnered with some excellent companies to build up those competencies and enable them to grow their businesses once they've been given the opportunity for economic inclusion. So these are all types of sort of tools and methodologies that we will be sharing with yourselves at the conference, and hopefully we'll secure your input on building up better competencies in this space. Obviously on the ecosystem side, again, you know, one could talk about the triple helix, and I think it's all very well understood. We're very fortunate in that not only do we run and work with clusters in Durban, but we also run and work with clusters in several other parts of the country as well. And so that ecosystem is growing and growing nicely. In fact, there's a recently established cluster around Mr. Price, one of the biggest retailers in the country. We're very excited about working with them and growing their localization journey as well. So with the clusters collaborating with the private sector, that middle band, partnering with the likes of the Toyota Vessels Institute of Manufacturing Studies, who I believe have committed, and we need to confirm, will host a tour through their own future of manufacturing facilities, partnering with the likes of Edge Growth and with the TVET colleges as education institutions, And then, of course, the public sector partners. eThekwini has been an exceptional partner of these clusters for many years as one of the founding members. We have several partners from provincial governments in the Eastern Cape and, of course, in KZN, the City of Cape Town, and then at a national level, the DTI and the IDC, who we in constant communication with as we try to sort of grow the partnership, grow the interest, and bring more consistency and, I suppose, formalization to the supportive ecosystem in which the private sector and, of course, clusters operate. And really, that's just a quick flyover, really, of some of the stuff that we're up to. We're really looking forward to meeting everybody in Durban and to learning from you. So thanks very much for the opportunity to share today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rob. I think this was a very good and deep presentation of the Durban clusters. Let me open the floor now for questions to the audience. If someone wants to make a question, this is like the time. And meanwhile, I see connected here many people, important people for us in South Africa. Nigel Wayne Evans, hello, Nigel. Good to see you. Hello. If someone wants to make a questions, yeah, greetings.
No,
Greetings,
just to say
Nigel.
hello. I'm very excited about this and looking forward to seeing many of you in Durban. And as Septi mentioned, I think we've been doing this roadshow across South Africa, so there's going to be some good attendance, and we'll certainly encourage lots of clusters that are currently operating to attend as well. So looking forward to seeing many old friends and catching up on what's been happening in the TCI world. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao, Nigel. Greetings. Nigel was the conference director for a previous conference in Cape Town in South Africa, so he knows well what is organizing a TCI conference. More questions from the audience? Are you eager to know more about the conference, or what kind of connections you can make, or something else where we can be helpful? Yes, we have here Merete.
Yeah,
it's yours.
while people warm up a bit and
Exactly.
think about questions. Well, Rob, I think I can also join you in the confession booth, so we can kickstart that. I think the journey of clusters is, you know, learnings and failures, and just sharing an open matter what is working and what isn't. So thank you so much for, I think, very useful overlook of what you're doing already. And I think it's always so nice to know you here, you know, complementary and similar ways of working and supporting with the cluster. So I have a couple of questions. So one thing, and as Patricia mentioned, that we have many cluster initiatives joining us in Durban, and I think that's a shift for us in the network. So that's great. Something we really want to support, the more specific outcome of the conference. I noticed in your very impressive overview of everything you do with the clusters that you don't mention internationalization. So is this because something you're not supporting or something you're working on? So is internationalization part of how you help and support the clusters, or is something that you want to do more, or how is that topic tackled in the cluster initiatives?
So, Merete, I lost you there. Did you say institutionalization of?
No, internationalization.
Internationalization.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's one of the weaknesses that we would be very interested in understanding more. So one of the problems of South Africa's geography is that we can be very isolated and tend to be very inward thinking because of our geography and where we're located. So the primary focus is on competitiveness, growth, localization, and of course exports as well, where appropriate, and that depends on the particular value chain. In terms of internationalization of clusters itself, that is not something that we've particularly looked at. So you've, I think, correctly identified something that we really need to think about.
I have another questions. I don't see a specific focus on your work on agri-food. Is that some concrete reason, or is it just that turned out to be like that?
We dabbling in agri-processing, food and beverages. We haven't established a formal cluster in that space, but certainly are looking to do so. It's a critical area. It's the biggest contributor in terms of the economy, jobs, both local food security supply and exports. So it's a very exciting space. We, again, just I suppose haven't got there yet. So please help us to do that. We'll be very grateful.
Of course, we will try. Benoit, I think one has a question. Hello, Benoit. You're welcome.
Thank you, Patricia. Welcome. Well, good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, I had a quick questions because we mentioned how in South Africa you have a focus on the automotive cluster, on tourism as well. Now we just mentioned agri-food. I was also wondering whether during the conference we might touch upon the topic of pharmaceutical or healthcare industry. Because, well, you know, we had a specific matchmaking event between the EU and Africa in general with the whole continent. I think it was in late May or June. That was, let's say, a first step, and that was something our Commissioner Breton wanted to develop forward. So I was just wondering whether this could be also a topic that we could be touching upon during the event. And also just to mention that we just had our European cluster conference last week in Prague. So from our side, it might also be interesting in case you want, of course, to give you also a little bit the feedback and the takeaways we had with the European cluster community very recently.
Excellent. Thank you, Benoit. Absolutely. I think it's crucial that we cross-fertilize both conferences. You know, we are also, Merete and myself, we were participating there. So we got many impressions from the European cluster community on what is top on their priorities. And also we always look at the European Commission as a trendsetter on policy. So yeah, excellent that we can exchange and as I said, cross-fertilize both. Yeah. On the other question, I'll let our Durban friends to answer. Any possibilities to engage with the healthcare sector and industry? We cannot hear you if someone is talking at the moment. Yeah, Russell, maybe. It's not something that we have. It came out in the many conversations that we had already with the steering group and our site visit and so on. But Russell, maybe you have more.
Patricia, sorry, would you mind just repeating the question for me?
Yeah, the question from Benoit is if there are going to be chances during the conference to engage more with the health sector or the health industry or health-related clusters, because this is something like really key for the European Commission, and it's yeah, well, relevant for them to make connections with this.
Oh, absolutely. So we don't have a formalized cluster per se in that life sciences area or health facility in the same form that we do with the others. However, the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry is the largest metropolitan chamber of commerce on the entire African continent with about 3,000 or 4,000 members. They have a medical professionals committee. So we can plug anyone with interest into that medical professionals and life sciences committee of the Durban Chamber of Commerce. Likewise, we can connect people directly to some of the larger African and South African corporates in that space, whether it's Aspen Pharmaceuticals, Aspen Pharma, I think, I can't remember if they're the third or fourth or fifth biggest pharma on the planet. They're headquartered in Durban. Or if the interest is more in hospitals and that kind of thing, then again, we've got a number of very robust private hospitals and medical aid schemes that we can connect you up with.
Thank you, Russell. There is another question from Vincent. When and how we will select the cluster tours? Yeah, this will be before the conference, of course, 2 weeks before, something like that. We will send, or organizers will send another registration link to update your preferences for the cluster visit. And yeah, in the next version of the program, we also want to include more information about the different cluster visits that we will have. Okay. Yeah, Merete, you wanted to comment something?
Yeah, just a small comment. Yeah, indeed, Benoit, it was great that we could meet in Europe, the whole European cluster community coming together after such a long period of not traveling and just being online. And I think it, created many ideas on where to go next, both in Europe and outside Europe as well. And this is, of course, not to tease Rob on lack of internationalization in the South African clusters, but also really a message coming from many of the clusters in Europe that, this kind of global collaboration, a huge strategic change in how the clusters in Europe and across the world are working together and wanting to collaborate more. So definitely a message we will also send strongly when we meet in Durban. Another message, I think, it's also the topic that Rob touched upon. How do we go from a more local or regional cluster policy to a more national approach? Something that also many countries and regions in Europe struggle with. In TCI, we did this TCI policy roadmap last year. So we have some learnings and some ideas to share when we meet, and how can we push this cluster agenda more. Impact matters, but it's also really great to have a policy supporting that, and definitely a topic we will come back to when we meet in Durban.
Thank you, Merete. Rob is selling apologies, but I need to leave this event now. He already told us he had to leave at 4, so I think he even extended a little bit more. Thank you for your presentation, Rob. And yeah, so no more questions from the floor. Septi, I leave you the floor to give the final words here and to welcome all of us in Durban in 1 month, more or less. You are muted, Septi. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. And what great joy it will be to welcome you all to Durban. I think from the interactions with my 2 colleagues here from this side, Rob and Russell, you really see how looking forward we are to welcoming you and having insightful conversations with yourself. So the team on the ground here is working hard on logistics, and we hope that you will enjoy your stay in Durban and that you will have an enjoyable and successful conference. Until November, we look forward to having you here.
Looking forward also from our side to welcoming you all in Durban, or to meet in Durban with all of you. Thank you very much for participating today. And it will be also our 25th anniversary celebration. We will have also some surprises there that we are already preparing. Thank you very much, everyone. Septi, Merete, Russell, and thank you all the participants. See you then.
Thanks, Patricia.
See you.